All right, guys, thank you for tuning in this channel. So today I'm going to continue on variables. This will be the last video where I will be talking about static variables. In my previous video, I spoke about instance variables. And in this video, I will talk about static variables. So as the name suggests, a static variable is a variable that is static, that will remain static throughout your program. And so what we first need to remember about these static variables is that a static variable is declared similarly as an instance variable. And the only difference will be that when you declare a static variable is that you have to use the static keyword. So let me first of all declare an instance variable as we did in the previous video. For example, I will say string first name like this. Okay, so this is an instance variable. You need to have a data type and then the name of your variable here. So the static variable will also follow the very same principle, but we will need to start by writing the static keyword. So if you want to declare a static variable, you need to write static, and then you write the data type. If I say int, the data type, and then say salary, salary here. So down here, I have declared my static variable. So this is when the compiler will look at this variable with the keyword static at the beginning here, the compiler will definitely know that the variable is a static one. Okay, so it's also similar to the instance variable because we can't declare it inside the method. Okay, you have here public void show info is a method. We can't declare a public instance, a public variable inside the method. So like we said with instance variables, they have to be declared inside the class and outside of the method or of a constructor. Because if you declare it inside the method here, that means that that variable will belong to that method. It will be taken as a local variable, okay? And the static variable is also called a class variable, meaning that it belongs to the class. Meanwhile, the instance variable is called the object variable because it belongs to the object. So I'm going to give an example just to illustrate what I mean by saying that. But before, what we can also remember is that if you want to have access to your static variable, you don't need to create an object of that class like we did with the instance variable. With the instance variable, for example, if I wanted to have access to this variable, I needed to create an object, then say test app, because that's the class. The class name is test app. And then if I want to create an object, I need to use the name of the class and then give a name to my object. I will say employee, say equal new test app. So an object is actually an instance of a class, okay? So that is that I'll create my object. And with instance variable, if I wanted to have access to the first name, I needed to use the name of my object, employee, that the name of the variable, first name, for example. And then if I wanted to initialize it, I could just initialize it here, okay? So with the static variable, it's not quietly the same way. With the static variable, all you need to do is to write the name of your class and then the static variable name. So that means that if I want to have access to salary, I want, for For example, I initialize it here. I say salary is equal to 28, for example. And let's say that I want to have access to it in my main method. I want to output this value 28 in my console. All I have to do is write the name of the class that will be test app, and then I'll write the name of the variable that will be salary, and so I need to initialize it here. Let me say, for example, 28. Let me remove this 28 here. And then I will do a system that out that print line. Inside, I will just write salary. So you will see that I will get the value 28 here when I run. Okay, I have 28. Why? Simply because I didn't need to create an object and all that. All I needed was to have the name of the class and then use my variable name and then initialize it and use it here. I have my output here. With instance variables, we needed to create the object and then pass the value of my variable to the object and then be able to output it during the system that print line. But it's not necessarily the same. With the static variable, all we need is the name of the class. And that's the reason why it is called a class variable, because it belongs to a class. You only need the name of the class in order to pass the value of that variable to an object or to in a method or in a certain block in your code. Okay, and the instance variable is called an object variable because, as you could see, in order to have access to it, you needed to have create an object and then pass the value of the variable through that object and then be able to output it in your console. So that's actually it. So we can also say that it's possible to have access to our instance variable without doing the test app here, or I will remove this one. If I initialize it here and give it the value of 28, and then I click on, so I've initialized it from the beginning in the class, I've said 28, and in my main method, I am doing the system that print line straight. You will see that I will still have the correct value showing on my screen. So let me change this to 14 so that we will see how the value will change here. And I click, so I have 14. So what it's doing is that the compiler already knows that salary is a static variable. So even if I don't use the name of the class and I directly use the name of the variable, because the compiler already knows that that variable is static, it will definitely not give me an error and go on to print out the value that was used when I initialized it. So that's pretty much how it works. So, or I could even come here and say, let me remove this one. I could initialize it inside my main method, say salary, and I say 28. Okay, so without using the name of the class or any object, the compiler already knows that salary is a static object variable. So if I click on run, you'll see that 28 will be in my console here. Okay, that's it. And another thing that we can know is that we can also have access to this static variable by using the object. Let me say that I create an object I create an object and call it employee again. And I say new. Okay, I have created an object. I can pass the value of salary through my object. What I can do is that I will write employee like we did with instance variables that salary, and I will initialize it here. Let me say 70. Okay. And then you will see that if I do the system that out, that print line, and say employee that salary, I will get a warning. I will not get the error, but I will have a warning. You know, I'm having warnings here that will remind me that the variable that I'm using is using a static modifier. Okay, as you can see here, remove static modifier of salary, because here it's like I'm treating that variable as an instance variable where normally it's a variable that belongs to a class. So I'm supposed, like what the compiler is suggesting is that I remove this from here. I remove the static. If I remove it, I will not have any message warning showing on the screen. As you can see, no warning. But as soon as I add it, so I will get a warning on my screen. But even if I run this one, I will not get an error. I will still be able to have the 70 in the console. So that's it. I am having 70 here. And but the only thing is that it's a warning and it's suggesting that I remove this one, or I have to initialize it in the proper way by using by simply using the name of the class and then the variable, the static variable name here. So that's also something, one characteristic of this static variable. So as the name suggests, that's the reason why it's called a class variable, because you know it like belongs to a class. You just need the name of the class in order to have access to it. Okay, and so it's a kind of variable which belongs to the class but not to the object. That's why we are having warnings here. And I could also show you that if I have access, if I try to remove this one, I directly have that static variable without using the class name. The compiler will automatically append the class name, okay? So this is done automatically. It knows that this variable is a static variables and will definitely give it a class name. And I will not get any error. Simply warning. No, it's saying static field test app that salary should be accessed in a static way. Okay, so that's the only thing it's telling me, because it already knows I will not get any error. But if I write test app, you will see that I won't get any error. Okay, so 70, no warning here. You know, I don't have any warning telling me that I'm not accessing it in the correct way. And what we can also say that it's not compulsory to initialize the static variable or the class variable. So it follows the same rule with instance variables, is that you don't need to initialize it. If you don't initialize it in your program, it will hold the default value according to the data type. Okay, so here I have system.out that print line salary. If I run it, you see that I have 0 because here we defined it. When we declared it, we gave it the data type of int, and the default value of int data type is 0. Okay, let me say, if I say static string name, for example, and I come here and I say name, normally we are supposed to get null because the default value for string data type is null. Okay, yeah, we have null here. So it's not compulsory to initialize it. If you don't initialize it, it will hold the default value according to the data type that was used when declaring 8. Okay, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell what I can say about static variables. And so we already did the local variables, we did the instance variables, and now we are doing the static variables. So that's pretty much it. If you have any question, feel free to comment this video, to like it, and to also subscribe in order to get more videos like this one. And I thank you for viewing. Let's meet in the next video. Thanks a lot.